Hello, everyone. Welcome to BBVA Stadium ahead of the Texas derby between FC Dallas, the visitors tonight, and the Houston Dynamo. My name is Jon Arnold. Victor Araiza, my compadre, my companion at the striker, Texas, is here alongside me. Victor, it's been a historic series of the Texas derby. Tonight, we'll see it decided because this is the last time these teams will play. It's an exciting time for fans of Texas soccer. And I hope their teams also can get a victory and kind of keep that playoff push, those hopes that are slimming for both teams alive. Welcome in, Victor. It's good to see you and good to be here.
Thank you, John. Welcome here to Houston.
Thank you.
Like you said, third meeting for these clubs this year. We're hoping for a good one here today. It's obviously a great atmosphere. I mean, we can see fans start to file in here tonight. And for Houston especially, I mean, after last week's 3-0 win over Austin, I mean, it makes the Copa Tejas much more intriguing, much more exciting. But FC Dallas could leave with 2 trophies here tonight as well.
We're going to talk a little bit about the Copa Tejas, which is on the line tonight. Will FC Dallas clinch it? Will they go home with that first edition of that new rivalry trophy that involves the 3 Texas teams? And will they hold on to that cannon that's played between Dallas and Houston? We'll get into the repercussions and ramifications of this game a little later. First, let's talk about where these teams are right now. What's their current form like? And Victor, let's start with Houston, the home team. As you mentioned, a big win that ended a really long streak, a long time without a win. And then the Houston Dynamo return, right? Another draw, but it's on the road, so it's not a bad result, right?
Yeah,
how is the Dynamo coming into this game?
I think there's a positiveness around the team. Maybe a big part of it was because, as you mentioned, it was a really long winless stretch, 16 games where they couldn't taste a victory. They just couldn't make things happen. And the season kind of took, we were talking about this last week here with Chris Bills. The last time Austin and Houston had faced off, Houston was in that playoff picture, and then this time around, I mean, they were looking to end that winless streak. Now they're here, arriving after a win and a impressive for a lot of people, a lot of fans tie at the LA Galaxy. They can obviously follow it up here tonight against FC Dallas with El Capitan on the line, the Texas Derby, get him back into that Copa Tejas race, and I don't think there's any expectations, and I think it's crazy, maybe ludicrous to say that this team has a chance to make the MLS Cup playoffs.
Okay.
But heading into 2022, there's obviously a amount of optimism around the Houston Dynamo. Ted Siegel, the owner, took part in the town hall with supporters this week. There was a lot of good things that he said, or there was music to the ears of Dynamo and Dash fans. So that's the mood around the club right now. It's a little bit on the up. A lot of that, like you said, is because they were pretty down for most of the year.
Obviously the ownership, and you wrote a great article on the Striker Texas recapping what Ted Siegel said to fans in that town hall and what people can maybe expect from this new owner. I know that's part of it. That's the long term. And in the short term, the team also looks better on the field. They won, and they come in off a win and a draw in the last 2 matches, and it's been a long time since we've been able to say that. What's different? What's working for Tab specifically on the field?
Darwin Quintero's back in the lineup.
Doesn't hurt anything, huh?
It doesn't hurt a lot. The designated player, they're finally getting their money's worth out of the 33-year-old Colombian, the former Liga MX star.
Scientist of the goal.
The scientist of goal. Comes into the lineup against Austin. They get up in the first minute, but unlike 2 weeks previous, when they went up against Minnesota, they had more control of the game. They were able to put Austin away. They were able to see out the result. A big reason why they looked a little better in that week during the week tie at the LA Galaxy. They were actually in control for the first half. They took the lead. They looked like a little bit more of a dominant team, and that's because we've talked about it all year. We talked about it on the Striker MLS podcast. This team, much like the other Texas teams, needs a difference maker. Darwin Quintero may not be the same guy he was in Liga MX, but he's certainly a difference maker on this team when he's playing, and that's been the difference for Houston these last couple games.
For FC Dallas, they're coming in on their own string of ties, which is maybe not good enough for FC Dallas. This is a team that's gone through an enormous swing, Victor, because they've been sitting just below that playoff line all year. They went to Real Salt Lake without their 4 international players, 3 extremely important players, I'd have to say, in forward Ricardo Pepi, who's been that difference maker so far this year. You talk about Quintero's influence. Pepi's influence has been much stronger even for Dallas, and giving them someone that scores goals, someone that Jesus Ferreira can link play with. It's been absolutely critical. He wasn't there in Salt Lake. Ryan Acosta in the midfield wasn't there. And you had Szabolcsún, the Hungarian winger, wasn't there either. Freddy Vargas hasn't seen that much of the field for FC Dallas this year. He also wasn't there with being and playing with Venezuela. They go up in that first half, and then you look at the live standings like fans like to do and members of the press like us like to do,
Well,
and it says
it was looking good.
FC Dallas in the playoffs. And then they lose that game 3-2.
Well,
They're below the playoff line, and then a draw at home against the San Jose Earthquakes, a draw during the week in New York City against New York City FC, actually technically in Harrison, New Jersey. A 3-3 game.
I thought you were lost in that game.
I was having trouble keeping up because you know how it is trying to write a story in the press box.
Yeah.
FC Dallas goes up early, then the NYCFC hits back. NYCFC goes ahead. FC Dallas hits back, ends up 3-3. A hard-fought game against a really difficult opponent. You know, one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference, and yet you talk to Luchi Gonzalez after the game. We talked to Jesus Ferreira after the game. Hey, what's the mood like? They're mad. They're frustrated because it feels like that playoff goal is slipping away from FC Dallas. The only way they get into the playoffs is that they find all 3 points here in Houston tonight.
No, and that's a big part of it, and I think we've talked about it again, going back to the Striker MLS podcast. We've talked about it earlier in the year. Where what's the expectation around this team? I mean, is it the year where they can finally get it together? You know, push forward. To me, they seemed a little bit more too relaxed early in the season, and maybe it's starting to catch up to them.
Yeah.
Will they make the playoffs? I think out of the 3 Texas teams, they're the ones who have the better opportunity. Can they make the playoffs, and can they make something? Well, they have Ricardo Pepi in great form. He scored in the last Texas Derby.
True. Nah, you know, we don't like to do math. Journalists don't like to do math. But it's math time. You know, you start to look at how many games are left. FC Dallas has only 9 games left on the schedule. There's 2 teams above them before you get to the teams in the playoffs. Both of those teams have 2 games in hand. The team in the last place playoff line going into tonight, LAFC, has 1 game in hand. So not only does FC Dallas need to make up a gap, they also need to do it with other teams losing games. So you're relying on other
never
people.
Good.
I think this is just when I crunch the numbers, and again, I'm not great at math. I think FC Dallas needs to win, not get points in, win 7 of their last 9 to be above that line guaranteed. Now, things can get crazy in MLS. We know that. But I think it has to be 7 of 9. Is it possible? Sure. Not if they don't win tonight's game.
Yeah, and then another question for you would be, are they that good? You know, or are fans maybe dreaming too much with a team that doesn't have the possibilities to be that good? Is it really just all Pepe, or can they get something done?
I think it's worth highlighting what Jesus Ferreira has done as well. But as the attack has gotten together, with Ferreira and Pepe linking well, Ferreira finding the back of the net himself, with or without Pepe sometimes, as they've started to find their form, as Paxton Pomykal has returned to the field from injury, which is quite critical for FCD, they have a different pep in their step when he's in the lineup. The defense has started to have some difficulties. A lot of that is down to suspensions, injuries, just absences because of, we talked about the international absences, but, in 3 of the last 4 games for FC Dallas, they've conceded 3 goals. You're not going to win a lot of games that you concede 3 goals in. Now, they managed to get a result in 2 of those, right? They get the win in Austin by scoring 5, and they get a draw with New York City by scoring 3. But when you go on the road and score 2 goals in MLS with road points so critical, if you score twice, that's a big accomplishment. If you score 3 times, even more so. And yet they come away with, from those games that they've conceded 3 in, 4 points out of those games. It's not good enough. So is the team good enough to make the playoffs? I think they're right there borderline. They're not Seattle. They're not Sporting Kansas City. They're not even teams that, again, they've gotten results against in the Eastern Conference, like the Revs and New York City FC. But I do think they do have enough talent to get across the line. Like you mentioned earlier, those home draws at the start of the season, I think that's going to be what we look back on when we write our end-of-year pieces on the Striker Texas.
Well,
for FC Dallas, I think we're going to say that's where they lost the playoff opportunity.
And they were the only playoff team from Texas last year as well. So, I mean, that's part of it. I want to take you into the rivalry. You mentioned Paxton Pomykal. He's obviously had things to say when these 2 teams are faced off.
I don't like Houston. Just doesn't like it. Fair enough.
And you mentioned before also Luchi Gonzalez has put a priority on these rivalries. What does this mean for the FC Dallas fans and for FC Dallas themselves?
It's interesting because we asked Luchi Gonzalez this week. Members of the press asked him, hey, well, look, you're chasing the playoffs. That seems to be priority number 1. And he's, yeah, that's true. But we also still need to beat Houston. We need to win these rivalry trophies. We need to win the season series. Beyond the hardware and beyond the bragging rights, I think they want to win the season series against as many teams as they can. And Houston, obviously being a close rival, they want to get that victory. They don't want to be dealing with what it feels like when the fans of the other team have the bragging rights. Ryan Hollingshead earlier in the season had a soundbite that I posted on Twitter that people seem to really enjoy, and I thought was funny when he said it. He said, when FC Dallas played Austin, he said, we see those things, and we want our fans to be able to respond to other fans on Twitter with bragging rights. So the players are conscious of this, at least in the FC Dallas locker room.
And fans love to hear that as well.
Oh, for sure. What's it like for Houston? This is maybe the most important thing they've got left this year. There's still slim playoff hopes, but this would be a moral boost going into that 2022 that you're saying expectations might be raised.
Yeah, I think I think from that perspective, FC Dallas maybe stresses a little bit more importance. I think from the Houston players, every time you ask them, it's always the cassette answers, right? I mean, it's a rivalry game. It's a win-win. Like, you have to win it, right? But I don't know if you get that Dallas hate like you get from a lot of Houstonians. Maybe even from Memo Rodriguez, who's the one local kid on the roster, right? I don't know if it exists to that point, like Pamico has done it. I think for the fans, it certainly means a lot. I think certainly for them, the bragging rights, what it means to beat FC Dallas, to re-stress that this is the only Texas club that has won an MLS Cup championship, nevertheless, too. So that always puts an extra spice on things. But certainly, it's always, I think, a rivalry that has given us good moments on the field, regardless of if in the stands they're not always as full as other rivalry games.
It might be a little bit of an omen. I really don't know, but Luchi Gonzalez has mentioned that he cares about this rivalry in part because of his days at the academy when he was academy coach, then academy director. Houston Dynamo and FC Dallas Academy squaring off today. I heard, Victor, it went pretty well for the Houston guys. I heard they won every single game at the youth level. Maybe my information's not totally right, but that's what I heard, is that it went pretty well. So maybe these first-team guys can change the tide?
Well, I think this one's the one that matters, not to take anything away from those levels. I think this one's the one that matters, obviously, for the moment that these teams are going through. And obviously because the trophy's on the line tonight. Houston, they haven't seen a Capitan here around recently. So I think that's kind of where it starts, getting that cannon back in the stadium. And then obviously we've mentioned throughout the year on the Striker Texas, Copa Tejas is now a new bragging rights, a new trophy this season.
Yeah, FC Dallas could lock up that trophy, the Copa Tejas, tonight, the MLS edition tonight, if they get a victory. So Houston will have a lot of reasons for motivation. Let's talk a little bit about how Houston wants to stop them from doing that, Victor. Let's get into the tactical battles a little bit. Is it all about Carlos Darwin Quintero? Or is there another player that you feel like on the Dynamo roster that's going to be announced in the starting 11 here in a few minutes that has to be the key player, or that's going to be doing something intricate or different tonight?
Look, I think it starts with Quintero for many reasons, because they have other guys, but at the end of the day, I call them complementary. Like, I think when the spotlight gets put on Quintero, and when Quintero is able to manage the game from the attack, that takes away attention from a Fafa Pico, who's been able to flourish.
Especially against FC Dallas, his former team. He scored in both games in the rivalry.
He scored from the penalty spot in the last two derbies. And then, he scored in the past 3 Texas derby. He scored for FC Dallas against Houston going back to last year.
Loves a rivalry game. So you're saying if Quintero is the focus of FC Dallas's defense, that frees up Pico on the other wing. Maybe they overload one
Griffin
side.
Dorsey was able to get his first MLS goal as well for that same reason. So I do think for that reason, he's sort of the key, and he lets others be able to have their moment. Maybe Urruti, we find another FC Dallas, ex-FC Dallas player, gets to have his first goal since June tonight because of Quintero on the field. Like you said, it's what's changed things for Houston recently, and I think that will be the key.
It's not exactly clever for me to say that the key player for FC Dallas is Ricardo Pepi, but it's difficult to say that it's not Ricardo Pepi. He's been such a difference maker, such a game changer. I think it's important to watch him tonight, as he's played a lot of minutes. He played in that U.S. men's national team senior game against Honduras. Then he played right after that against San Jose, with FC Dallas not having a fit forward other than him. Then he goes to New York and plays the entire game. So he's a young guy. He bounces back. He recovers well, but I think that's going to be important. One thing to watch tonight is that Franco Jara is fit. He's traveled. I just saw him warming up
Another ex-Liga MX star.
So it's possible the former Pachuca man comes off the bench and sticks one in the eye of Carlos Quintero. Not that Quintero does a lot of defending, but we'll leave that to a side for now.
The other key
player for FC Dallas, and he's not the star, and in fact, maybe the opposite, is I think tonight, and we should see the starting lineups here in just a few moments. Maybe you guys watching on Twitter already have it, but I believe that Jimmy Maurer will not get the start tonight, still dealing with a thigh issue. That means Philippe is in goal for FC Dallas again, and he's had some struggles. He's had difficulty kind of adapting to what it means to be in the starting lineup. He's been okay, but not fantastic. So I think if I'm the Dynamo, I'm shooting early and often on the Brazilian goalkeeper. If Jimmy Maurer is fit, another reason to test the goalkeeper often because, he'll have to knock the rust off a little bit. And of course, like I said, maybe we already know what the starting lineups look like, but we don't have them yet here.
I think we're still a little bit early on that front.
Classic TV kickoff. We'll see when this thing actually kicks off. But until then, we'll give you some analysis for the next few minutes here. As I mentioned, I think Philippe, a key player for FC Dallas at the back, the goalkeeper. What about for Houston? How do they stop Ricardo Pepi? Can you do it? What's the strategy?
Well, they have invested. The new owner has invested since he took over in the defensive line, trying to build that defense for the future. They've re-signed Tim Parker, who I think has had his moments at times, and then other times hasn't looked his best. Naturally, that's going to lead to them not winning in 16 games. Right? I mean, the defense is going to be part of it. Teenager Davey has been the acquisition of the summer for Houston. It looks like now they're finally clicking. Both of them, they're finally playing a little better together. Obviously on the outsides, on the right, it's been Sarek Valentin, who's obviously an MLS veteran, and Adam Lundqvist. I mean, I think has won the battle overall on that left. So I think that's your back line for the foreseeable future in Houston. And obviously they've proven to do well in the last couple of games. Also, key has been Michael Nelson, the Houston native, the Katy native from the Houston area. Local product, went to college at SMU, finally gets his chance with Marco Maric, the goalkeeper, getting injured. Has made Team of the Week for MLS. Has gotten his first shutout. It also makes it interesting because I think we're going to see if maybe for the future they start going with Nelson over Maric. So they retain the Croatian goalkeeper. What's going to happen there? But certainly, going to your point, if this defense can stop Ricardo Pepi, they look much, much better, right? And that makes the conversation for starting goalkeeper much tougher on Tab Ramos or whoever the coach is going to be here in Houston going forward.
Yeah, there could be some touchline drama here. I know after the last time FC Dallas played down here, that was when the supporters over there in that end had the Fire Matt Jordan banners. The team listened, but there could be more changes, as you've alluded to in the past, Victor, in the front office and kind of also the touchline potentially. Is it? I know you said it's ludicrous. Is there any hope that the Dynamo still jump into the playoffs?
No, not based on what we've seen. I mean, sure. I think they would have had to win at LA Galaxy. You can't go winless on the road. I think, and that's obviously been a problem not just during the Tab era, but going farther back. No, and I think, and I wrote about this in the three things after the LA game. I mean, look, you see Quintero play. You obviously now see that he is a difference. But we sort of knew that. I mean, we've talked about it on the podcast. We sort of knew what
was behind him not being in the lineup, because I think it was confusing from the outside. Was it confusing in Houston as well? Why
I think it was
he getting
confusing.
More minutes?
Look, the reasoning behind it from the head coach was the fitness wasn't there, and I mean only they can judge him, right?
Sure.
But now he all of a sudden, or for whatever reason, now he's fit.
Found his fitness.
Now he's fit. Now he can last more minutes in the game. Now. Obviously, naturally, he's finding his form. He got his first MLS assist and in 2 starts. So, and before that, he hadn't even cracked 200 minutes all season. When last year he was the leader in goals and assists for the Houston Dynamo. So, but going back to what I was telling you after this game against LA, what is the purpose of this? Is it to string a couple wins, to bring a couple good times to Houston before we start seeing more change, or where are they going with this? Because if they're now, if they're thinking they're still going to make the playoffs, I mean, I guess you can't fault them for trying. But if the vision is now 2022, is Quintero going to be part of that picture in 2022? We talked about Tab, obviously. I mean, I guess obviously the priority there is securing his job with the owner and whoever the incoming general manager is going to be.
Some drama for Dallas as well if you look to 2022, but the focus is still on the playoffs because it is still potentially there, right? Dallas has been hovering there all season. I do think if it's not a good result tonight for FCD, I do wonder kind of how long do you keep? I mean, look, you're going to keep pushing for wins. You're going to keep trying to get into the postseason, and really, there's no turning to the future with Dallas, right? Future's always now. it's always the future is always the present with FC Dallas.
Well,
When you look at guys like Pepe, although you wonder if maybe he could have even started a little sooner during the season, but with the way that the team sells players, with the way that the team utilizes academy
and
products,
that's got to be a question, right? I mean, when is Pepe going to get sold?
yeah,
Because that's going
absolutely,
to change the face of the Dallas team
absolutely.
once he leaves.
No, and it's hard to see. We've seen Franco Jara lead the line. I think he's actually a quite nice piece to come off the bench. Like FC Dallas is able to utilize him now, but he's also pretty expensive player to have sitting on your bench when you pay him as much as the MLS Players Association salary database says you pay him. So there will be transition there as well, but I don't think FC Dallas is ready to turn that page yet. And again, I do think it starts tonight as they try and secure the rivalry hardware, both El Capitan and the Copa Tejas, which we'll talk about a little more here in detail, but also trying to kind of continue to push and get into the playoffs. So I think that's where FC Dallas is tonight, is that the playoffs are still the focus. I wrote in my preview on the Striker Texas, and that also appeared in print in our partners, the Dallas Morning News, about how that is still the focus. It's, yes, we want to win the rivalry trophy, but also we think we can make the postseason. From the outside perspective, Victor, when you look at the standings, you said it's ludicrous for Houston to be thinking about it. Is it ludicrous for FC Dallas to be thinking about it?
No, I don't think so. If they can string the wins, but I mean that's it's tough, right? Because I mean we've been saying that all year with FC Dallas. I mean
Absolutely.
if this happens, and it just doesn't, which kind of brings me to a question I've asked you before on the podcast, and what is it? What is it with FC Dallas? Why can't they get to that next level? Why can't they climb the echelon? And because look, I think certainly they have the makings of being able to be amongst the Seattles and maybe even the LAFCs, the Galaxies, as far as just results year in year out, being in the playoff picture, being a consistent MLS winner, and then obviously with the academy, there's very little competition.
Right. When you look at this year over the long term, I think one of the biggest issues that FC Dallas had was the fact that their new additions, even to this day, Victor, are still saying we're adapting, which means they're not playing well enough yet, right? You don't say a player's still adapting if he comes in and scores 5 goals in the first month or what have you. That hasn't been the case for FC Dallas. Jadero Brian, Freddy Vargas, Jose Martinez has gone through some bad injury luck at the back, but he's not even a nailed-on starter at the back.
Yeah, no, you're right.
But those wingers, I think they were really, FC Dallas let Fafa Pico come down here to Houston. They let Michael Barrios, they flipped Michael Barrios to Colorado Rapids. And the idea was that these new wingers coming in were going to give the team a boost, that you weren't even going to miss those guys. But FC Dallas has missed Michael Barrios a lot this year. They've missed Fafa Pico some. And I think that when you look at that, Paxton Pomykal, when he's healthy, makes a big difference on the wings. But he's a guy who, is he a winger? Sometimes he can be. He certainly is on this team, but you can see him in other places. Shabul Shun, he's adapted well to the league, right? We talk about a player who is passing out assists in Copa Tejas matches against Austin.
Right.
He's coming to play. He could be in the starting lineup tonight, as again we'll get to when we get them. But those new additions, with the exception of Shun, I think have not quite lived up to not only their billing, but then what they needed to do to adapt quickly, how they needed to get accustomed to MLS and the style of play, the speed of play. So I think that's the biggest reason that you're looking at FC Dallas, not with, the teams, even an LAFC, Real Salt Lake, those teams that are there at or above the playoff line. To me, that's what's gone wrong. They've also had some situational, I don't think it's inexperience. We've seen academy players excel. The star of this team is 18 years old.
Right.
I think it's naivete. I think that there have been times on set pieces, for instance, where FC Dallas hasn't put a foot in front of the ball and said, no, you're not taking this quickly. Or if the team takes it quickly, they haven't scrambled back quickly enough to defend whatever happens after the set piece. Or on a corner kick, guys get screened off. There's been some, and set pieces is just one example, but I think that
Houston has struggled with set pieces as well.
Yeah, I think there's been some naivete on set pieces, but also, even more broadly, there are times where the game situation calls for FC Dallas to press harder or higher than they have been, and they don't. Even as Lucci is kind of signaling, press, whether it's fatigue or what, there are times where it doesn't happen. Little things, details have hurt FC Dallas this year, and I think that's why you're looking at a team that, although they hope to be able to say our season's extended, we're going into the postseason, it feels like this rivalry silverware might be their best opportunity to hang their hat on something this year.
Yeah, well, I don't think FC. Well, I don't know. I guess you can let us know in the comments what you would be happy with this year. But I think, I think certainly the MLS playoffs, if you can make them, I mean that's where you want to be. And ultimately, the fact that these teams are hanging around, fighting for these, you know, consolation trophies, because that's what they are for in a season like this where they're not,
You
nowhere
want to
near
win
the
the rivalry trophy and brag about it and say, we made the conference finals or we made MLS
right.
Cup and we've got
It's
the
a plus.
trophy,
It's an
not
extra plus.
all we have is the trophy.
Right.
Yeah.
So
That's what it'd be for Houston if they get it is
yeah, well, it will be. It will be because it's been a bad year, and it just adds to, um, the years and years of a lack of success down here. A once proud franchise, and I think, look, certainly all the attention was on the general manager down here, on Matt Jordan. But I think now the moves have to start being made in the other direction, which is maybe why there's a little bit more positivity around Houston as opposed to, maybe what FC Dallas is experiencing. They kind of know their situation. I think we got lineups here.
we got rosters. Let's talk about FC Dallas's first because that's what I've got pulled up. Philippe does start in goal tonight. Jimmy Maurer is not able to be on the bench. Kyle Zobek is fit for the bench. He'll be the backup goalkeeper, but it's Philippe, the Brazilian, who starts. It's once again Nkosi Tafari and Matt Hedges as the center backs, as Justin Shea plays right back and Ima Tumasi plays left back. In the midfield, Facundo Quignon and Brandon Cervania will partner once again in central midfield with Jesus Ferreira in front of them. Paxton Pomical on one wing, Javier Obrian on the other, and Ricardo Pepi does get the start tonight. Another consecutive start after he missed time with the international break. Let's go through the Houston lineup. Victor, you want to take us through what the Dynamo look like tonight?
Yeah, no surprising goal. Michael Nelson back. Like we mentioned, he's a player to watch. I think certainly in this run of stretch where players are fighting for their jobs. That's the way I'm putting it. Again, no surprise in the back four. Longpest, Parker, Davey, and Valentine all on part of the back four. The midfield, Darwin Seren steps in. Matias Vera is also in the middle, and obviously, two defensive style midfielders behind the one and only Carlos Darwin Quintero, who gets his third MLS start this season. And then up top, I don't think there's a lot of surprise. Like we mentioned it, Fafa Pico and Griffin Dorsey out on the wings. They've been the preferred wingers currently for Top Ramos. They've been playing well. They're the ones best in form. And in the middle, it's not like Houston has anybody else. It's Maxi Urruti.
It's going to be an interesting contest, I think, tactically. And one of the big things for FC Dallas that showed against New York City FC was the transition play. That's something where that Houston Dynamo midfield, Darwin Seren, a player I see often for El Salvador, not always the quickest in the move from defense to attack. So maybe that's something FC Dallas looks to exploit.
And he hasn't, certainly, because he hasn't had his best moments for Houston Dynamo this season. Last year, I think when you kind of go back and you see, the Darwin connection between Seren and Quintero, that was
the law firm.
Yeah, that provided a little bit better results. This year, I think Seren has had definitely more to give, or just has just left. In terms of what has been his best year at Houston, not the best impression. I mean, there was a red card against Austin earlier in the year. Obviously he was recently injured, but then he, all of a sudden pops up and he's playing with El Salvador. Which naturally, I think once you get into World Cup implications, you're going to play
for your country. Got to play
whichever way you're going to. Right, you got to play. But I don't think it's been his best year, and I think there's been moments where he's been exploited. Look, if we go back to the Gold Cup with Salvador, a lot of people remember that game against Qatar, and that wasn't his best moment. That's kind of the Seren that you could get in a game like this. Houston will hope they get the other version.
No, and certainly a player that Houston has seen and knows they can get reliable performances from. But I think FC Dallas will look to exploit him and try and key quick transitions, moving from defense to attack quickly. I think that FC Dallas has seen success from that. It's not a surprise, Victor, the starting 11, but I am curious, and I've been asking Luchi Gonzalez a couple questions in the last few weeks about Shabut Shun and Brian Acosta. They're both guys who went to play for their national teams in the international break. Shun had a really long flight back from Hungary. Acosta played in, I think, 2 of the 3 games during the window, or maybe even all 3. I can't remember. He didn't start in all of them, but he had time in all of them. So Pepi played in 1. So Gonzalez said, I feel comfortable bringing Pepi back in. But Acosta and Shun haven't recaptured their places in the starting lineup. But you often see them off the bench quickly in the second half. Players that could change this game. And especially when you talk about the transition, Shun is a player who's able to play back, to track back, to win the ball back, and then quickly transition to attack. Again, it's not a surprise because of what we've seen. But if you made me manager, I would retire and resign. I would not be a good manager, but I do think I'd put Shun into the starting lineup, and I think I'd give Acosta an opportunity next to Quignon, but Brandon Cervena keeping his spot, a player that Tab Ramos actually spoke about during the press conference this week, and even sort of dropped a hint that maybe, there's a family connection there with Brandon and some time that he spent with Tab's youth system, if I'm not mistaken, and Jaden, his brother, who plays for Birmingham Legion and the Puerto Rico national team. But he was a guy who I think Tab really has a lot of respect for. He's going to be in the starting 11 tonight.
Right, and that's certainly a good point you bring up with FC Dallas. I think with Houston as well, what can they get off the bench? Because I think once the starting lineup starts running out a little bit out of gas, like we mentioned, one of the concerns with Quintero for Tab Ramos has been the fitness and how long he can last. And certainly when you look at the bench, Memo Rodriguez is going to be a player that you're going to have to expect some minutes out of some good performance coming off the bench. Hasn't quite hit and maybe the expectations are a little too skewed or too high or what have you, but hasn't hit that level that I think the Dynamo were expecting him to achieve, especially the way he started the season, a little aggressive, and then he kind of just went quiet. But I think certainly with Quintero's, we know probably not going to play the whole game. Rodriguez has to come in and kind of keep that intensity, which he's been doing in the last couple of games. So I think that's part for Houston. Lassiter hasn't scored a goal, not for the Dynamo at least, all season.
Pops up for Costa Rica now and then. But
Corey Baird back in the lineup after injury. Joe Corona is obviously a player that's been in midfield. Another former FC Dallas, Minor Figueroa, Derek Jones, Bonilla Garcia, who's certainly seen enough Texas derbies. Sam Junka and Kyle Morton. I don't think the backup goalkeeper might see any time, but who knows?
You never know what can happen in the Texas Derby. Edition 45 of this classic rivalry between Dallas and Houston. We've got all your coverage pre-match over on the Striker Texas, a preview that I wrote about FC Dallas's urgency to get those playoff points, but also their desire to take these rivalry trophies. Victor, you broke things down in our match preview as well. So if you're a fan of the Dynamo, a fan of FC Dallas, a fan of Texas soccer, we've got everything for you over at the Striker Texas. You can go in there. Of course, if you're not already signed up, there's a 30-day free trial. That'll get you a month. We think you'll stick around because I think you'll like what you see. Again, if you're not already following, click the follow, whatever direction it's in. And thanks for joining us as we preview this Texas Derby match. We're going to give you some time to read that pre-match coverage, to subscribe to the Striker Texas, and then have all your post-game coverage over there. We'll also be back here on the post-game show doing exactly this, but talking about what happened instead of what might happen. If that sounds like something you'd be into, join us, 15 minutes, 30 minutes after the game on the Striker Texas social media channels. We'll talk to you guys then. For Victor Araiza, I'm Jon Arnold at BBVA Stadium.